Welcome everyone to Myth and Magic. Our previous video was talking about the Trooping or the High Fae and kind of giving an explanation as to how they behaved and what they are really like. In this video, we will be telling some traditional folklore stories that features the Trooping Fae. Now, please excuse me as we go through this. I do have pronunciation guides throughout the stories. I hope for everything. But I will be doing my best, so bear with me. And first, make sure you grab your cozy socks if it's not too warm. Your favorite drinky drinks. Mine is probably too warm for the warm weather we are having, but it's my favorite. And put on your crowns. And let's begin with our first story. The source for this story is the early Irish mythological cycle found in the 12th century manuscript, The Book of the Dun Cow. I would try to pronounce the Gaelic, I believe, but I actually apparently do not have a pronunciation assistant for that. So I'll put it maybe in the show notes. Now, this is one of the oldest recorded tales of the High Trooping Fae, the Dinashi, demonstrating how a fairy monarch would cross realms to reclaim a stolen spouse or assert a royal marriage. Long ago, before the surface of Ireland belonged entirely to mankind, the world beneath the hollow hills was a place of endless twilight and glittering courts. Within the mound of Brilé, the high nobility of the Tuatha De Danann held sway, ruled by the proud and ancient King Midir. His queen was Atine, a woman whose grace and beauty were unmatched across all the realms of the Fae. But the peace of the subterranean court was fragile. Midir's first wife, consumed by a bitter centuries-old jealousy, struck Atine with a terrible curse. The queen's physical form dissolved, reshaping into a delicate fly with wings of spun gold. A magical tempest tore through the mound, blowing the golden fly out into the cold mortal world. For 7 years, she was tossed by the winds until exhausted. She fell from the rafters of a mortal king's hall directly into a noble woman's golden cup. Swallowed in a single gulp, the fairy queen was reborn into the mortal world as a human princess. She grew up with no memory of her past, eventually marrying the mortal High King of Ireland, Ohu, and taking her place on the throne at the royal palace of Tara. Midir and his glittering host of trooping fae did not forget her. For centuries, they watched the mortal realm, waiting for the perfect moment to reclaim what was theirs. One crisp autumn morning, King Ohu stood upon the high ramparts of Tara, looking out over the misty plains. The air grew suddenly warm, and the faint, unmistakable chiming of silver bells echoed from the forest edge. Out from the trees rode a lone knight on a magnificent snow-white steed. He wore a tunic of royal green silk embroidered with gold, and his hair shone like polished silver. It was Midir, disguised as a mortal lord, yet carrying the sharp, painful beauty of the High Fae. Midir reached the gates seamlessly and approached the king with an easy, elegant smile. "I have heard of your skill at chess, King Ohu," Midir declared, his voice carrying the resonance of ancient music. "I have traveled far to challenge you to a match." Ohu, fiercely proud of his strategic mind and bound by the rigid laws of hospitality, accepted the challenge. "What shall be the stakes?" the king asked. "Let the winner name whatever reward their heart desires," Midir replied softly. Ohu agreed. They sat at the heavy oak table, the court gathering around them. In the first few games, Midir intentionally held back, playing carelessly and losing match after match. As payment for his losses, Ohu demanded grand forfeits. Midir simply nodded, and overnight, using the raw magic of the Trooping Fae, he cleared massive, rocky plains for agriculture, built dirty stone roads across the bogs and herded thousands of prized, flawless livestock into the king's pastures. Ohu was thrilled by his sudden wealth, grew overconfident, and demanded one final game. This time, Ohu said, the stakes remain absolute. The winner takes all. Meteor's eyes flashed with cold, ancient light. The final game began, but this time, the Fairy King did not hold back. His moves were swift, calculated, and alien. Within an hour, Ohu's king was cornered. Checkmate, Meteor whispered, leaning back. The great hall fell silent. Ohu felt a sudden, heavy dread settle in his chest. Name your prize, the king commanded, his voice tight. A king's word cannot be broken. Meteor stood, his gaze shifting across the hall where Queen Atene sat, watching the stranger with a faint, puzzling sense of familiarity. My prize is simple, Meteor said, stepping towards the dais. I demand to hold Atene in my arms and kiss her. The court gasped, and Ohu's hand flew to the hilt of his sword. With the law of compensation and the honor of a royal oath held him fast. To break a promise to a noble guest was to invite the immediate, catastrophic curse of the land. I will grant it, Ohu growled, but not today. Return in 1 month's time and you shall have your wager. Meteor bowed elegantly, turned, and vanished into the morning mist. For the next 30 days, Ohu did not rest. He summoned thousands of mortal soldiers from across the provinces, fortifying the palace of Tara. When the night of the deadline arrived, the royal hall was locked from the inside with heavy iron bars. Armored men stood shoulder to shoulder, spears bristling, creating a wall of flesh and steel around Queen Atene. Ohu sat beside her, his sword drawn, but the walls of men meant nothing to the high nobility of the Seelie Court. At midnight, the torches in the hall flickered and dimmed, casting long, strange shadows. The heavy iron locks on the doors didn't break. They simply dissolved into a mist of white flowers. Meteor appeared in the center of the locked room, glowing with an otherworldly radiant light that blinded the guards. The soldiers froze, paralyzed by the sheer weight of the Fairy King's glamour. Meteor walked past the frozen guards, stepped up to the dais, and gently reached out his hand. The moment Atene's fingers brushed his, the mortal veil over her mind shattered. Centuries of memories rushed back, the twilight courts, the endless summer, and the husband she had lost. I remember, she whispered. Ohu lunged forward with his sword, but he was too late. Before the blade could fall, Meteor pulled Atene close. A brilliant flash of gold and silver light filled the room, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. When the light faded, the two Fae were gone. In their place, a pair of magnificent white swans rose into the air. They leaned their necks together, soared up through the high roof opening of the wall, and flew out into the starry night, returning together to the subterranean fairy court, where Atene took her rightful place once more as the immortal queen. Story 2, The Legend of Knockgrafton, The Reward of Harmony. This one is collected by T. Crofton Croker in Fairy Legends and Traditions of the South of Ireland, 1825. This classic story highlights the Seelie Court's collective obsession with music, community revelry, and their deep value for perfect manners and artistic contribution. In the lush rolling hills of County Tipperary, there once lived a poor, kind-hearted basket weaver named Lesmore. Though his hands were skilled and his soul was gentle, he bore a heavy, cruel burden, a severe, disfiguring hump on his back. The growth caused him constant nagging pain and turned him into a social outcast, as superstitious villagers often avoided his gaze. Yet Lusmore refused to let bitterness take root in his heart, carrying himself with a quiet, cheerful dignity. One chilly autumn evening, Lusmore was journeying home, his baggage straps straining against his weary shoulders. His path took him past the moat of Knockgrafton, a massive, ancient earthen barrow known by all locals to be a sacred dwelling of the Seelie Court. As he neared the mound, the sun dipped beneath the horizon, night fell completely, and a thick silver mist rolled across the grass, swallowing the path. Exhausted and unable to find his way, Lusmore sat down to rest against the foot of the mound. Just as his eyes began to close, a strange, vibrant energy rippled through the air. The dead silence of the night was shattered by the sound of thousands of tiny, otherworldly voices echoing from deep within the earth. It was the Trooping Fae, singing a simple, hauntingly beautiful melody in a collective, rhythmic chant over and over. Daluan da mort, Daluan da mort. Lusmore, who possessed a natural, brilliant ear for music, listened intently to the Irish Gaelic, which simply meant Monday, Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday. He noticed that the melody, while mesmerizing, felt incomplete, as if the fairies were trapped in a musical circle, searching for a way to progress. The troupe paused for a brief, collective breath. Seized by a sudden wave of artistic inspiration, Lusmore lifted his voice and sang out in the swirling mist, perfectly catching their rhythm and flawlessly finishing their cadence. Agus da Cadina, his beautiful addition meaning "and Wednesday," echoed in the night. The singing inside the mound stopped instantly. A breathless silence gripped the hill, followed by an explosive roar of excitement from beneath the earth. Suddenly, a violent whirlwind swept across the grass, lifting Lusmore off his feet. The solid earth beneath him seemed to dissolve like water, pulling him down, down, down into the glowing subterranean palace of the Fae. When his eyes adjusted, Lusmore found himself standing in a magnificent hall filled with dazzling light, surrounded by thousands of beautiful, sharp-featured fairy lords and ladies, dressed in green and gold silk. The entire court was in an uproar of pure joy. The Dinashi rushed forward, lifting the humble basket weaver and placing him upon a golden seat of honor. The fairy king stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with delight. He declared that Lusmore's polite manners and artistic talent had perfected their ancient, stagnant song, breaking a musical spell they had been under for centuries. "For your harmony," the king commanded, waving his hand over the weaver, "you shall have a grand reward." Instantly, a sensation of incredible lightness washed over Lusmore. The heavy, painful hump detached from his back completely and vanished into thin air. A deep, peaceful sleep overcame him right there on the golden chair. The next morning, the bright sun woke Lusmore. He blinked and realized he was lying on the soft, dew-covered grass back on the hillside of Knockgrafton. He stood up, stretching his limbs, and gasped. His pain was entirely gone. He stood perfectly straight-backed, his posture proud and tall. When he looked down, he found that his old, tattered rags had been transformed into the finest clothes of woven green silk and gold embroidery. Lusmore walked back to his village with a light step, a cured man forever blessed by the musical gratitude of the Seelie Court. Story 3. The Captive Wife of the Sidhe, the Midnight Procession. This comes from traditional Scottish Highland folklore, or collected in the Outer Hebrides. This story highlights the famous trooping procession, or the fairy raid, where the high nobility of a Seelie Court would move in a massive, glittering cavalry line across the landscape, and how humans had to navigate their abductions. In the rugged, wind-swept hills of the Scottish Highlands, a young farmer and his wife celebrated the birth of their first child. But their joy was short-lived. Just days after the birth, a shadow fell over the household. The young mother vanished from her bed, and in her place lay a sickly, withered child that cried without ceasing. Within days, the infant passed and was buried. The village whispered of a tragic twist of fate, but the farmer, broken-hearted, refused to believe his true wife was gone. He knew the ancient lore of the land. He knew she had been stolen by the Sidhe, the high, majestic Trooping Fae of Scotland. Desperate for answers, the farmer journeyed into the mist to consult a local seer. The old mystic closed his eyes and confirmed the farmer's darkest fears. Your wife's extraordinary beauty has undone her, the seer whispered. She has been taken to the subterranean kingdoms of the Seelie Court, chosen to ride in the inner circle of fairy royalty. The farmer begged for a way to save her. The seer looked at him with grave eyes and offered a single terrifying chance at rescue. On the Halloween night, the veil between worlds thins. The entire troop of the Sidhe will ride in a grand procession across the lonely moor. You must stand by the ancient stone cross. You will hear the chiming of silver bells first. The Fae will ride in 3 disciplined lines. Your wife will be in the second line, mounted upon a magnificent white horse. You must jump out, pull her down from the saddle, and defend her with cold iron. When Halloween arrived, the farmer stood shivering by the stone cross, the bitter autumn wind biting at his skin. Hours passed in pitch darkness. Then, precisely at midnight, a brilliant, unnatural light illuminated the heather. The heavy silence was broken by the ethereal, rhythmic chiming of hundreds of silver bells. Out of the mist rode the majestic troop. Hundreds of beautiful lords and ladies dressed in rich green velvet and silk moved past on silent, ghostly steeds. They possessed a sharp, breathtaking beauty that nearly brought the farmer to his knees. He forced himself to watch the passing lines. As the second wave of the cavalry surged forward, his heart leapt. There she was. His wife sat atop a snow-white horse, looking more radiant than ever. Yet her eyes were glassy and distant. Nerving himself, the farmer lunged out from the shadow of the stone cross. He dodged the ghostly mounts, reached up, grabbed his wife by the waist, and dragged her forcefully off the horse. Instantly, the beautiful parade ground to a violent halt. The radiant light turned a sickening, cold blue. The Trooping Fae bared their teeth, letting out a collective, piercing shriek, a fury that echoed across the mountains. Seeking to break the man's grip, the sorcery of the court targeted the captured woman. In the farmer's arms, her form began to rapidly shift into a succession of terrifying illusions. First, she transformed into a roaring, vicious lion, then a slick, slithering, venomous serpent, and finally, a glowing red-hot bar of solid iron that seemed to scorch his hands. Though his heart hammered with terror, senses screamed at him to run, the farmer held on tightly, refusing to let go of his love. With his remaining hand, he dug into his pocket and drew out a single rustic weapon, a cold iron nail. He pressed the raw metal firmly against her shifting skin. The moment the cold iron touched her, the ancient, unyielding laws of fairy protection took hold. The terrifying illusions shattered in a flash of gray smoke. His wife lay in his arms, gasping as the trance broke from her eyes. The king of the troop stepped his horse forward, staring down at the mortal with a cold, piercing glare. He realized they had been fairly beaten by a human who understood their weaknesses. With a dismissive, aristocratic wave of his hand, the king commanded the march to resume. the grand procession dissolved seamlessly back into the midnight mist, leaving the moor silent once more. The farmer stood up, wrapped his coat around his shivering wife, and successfully walked her back home, free from the clutches of the Seelie Court forever. Our last story. The Ride of the Seelie Court, the Riddle of the Seelie Court. This is a Scottish Highlands folkloric story known as the Ride of the Seelie Court. On a crisp midsummer's eve, a young man named Tam was walking home along a lonely ridge near a known fairy mound. The night air was completely still until the faint, unmistakable sound of silver bells began to echo through the valley. Remembering the warnings of his elders, Tam knew a regal procession was near. He quickly dove into a thick patch of prickly gorse bushes to hide himself from sight. Suddenly, the hillside split open, pouring out a brilliant, radiant light that defied the night. Out rode the Seelie Court in their grand, majestic parade. At the front were the fairy knights, their armor gleaming like polished silver under the moonlight, followed by long rows of beautiful lords and ladies dressed in flowing green silk. In the center rode the fairy queen herself, her otherworldly beauty so sharp and intense that Tam had to shield his eyes to keep from being blinded. As the troop passed his hiding spot, a young fairy knight paused, his white horse sniffing the air. The knight turned his head and looked directly into the bushes, locking eyes with Tam. The human froze in absolute terror, knowing that within the strict laws of the Dinashi, any sign of fear or disrespect was an insult. He could be struck down with an elf stroke, a sudden paralyzing curse, or dragged into the mound to serve the court forever. Tam did the only thing he could remember from the old rules of etiquette. He quietly took off his hat, bowed his head deeply while remaining hidden, and whispered into the wind, "Blessings to the good neighbors on their journey." The fairy knight stared into the bush for a long, agonizing moment, carefully assessing the human's manners. Slowly, the tension broke, and a faint, cold smile crossed the knight's aristocratic face. He reached down, unclipped a small silver buckle from his horse's bridle, dropped it gently onto the grass, and rode on to join the glittering procession. When the court finally vanished into the night air and the hillside sealed shut, Tam crawled out of the bushes, trembling. The silver buckle remained resting on the grass, a rare token of reward for absolute politeness to the high nobility of the Seelie Court. Thank you for listening to this deep dive story time into the High Fae, known more folklorically as the Trooping Fae of the Seelie Court. I hope your cozy socks have been cozy. I hope you were able to finish your drink. I hope you've been enjoying your crown. And if you don't have one, there's no reason not to get one. I hope you enjoyed these stories. We will be talking about the solitary fae in our next videos and doing some stories with them. If there are any mythological creatures, gods, anything of that sort, anything that is mythological and fantastical, fantasy, these are so that we can learn and have fun, but also if you are creative, a writer like me, it hopefully will inspire and give you some education. I really want to write about the Fae now, so thank you for who asked for us to talk about the Fae. This is probably more of the video that you were looking for of the High Fae, instead and their kind of origins and what they originally are. So hopefully this was fun for you, and we will continue going onto the fairy journey until either I run out of stuff, or I decide on something else, or someone asks me to do something different. I enjoyed the Fae. I think they are definitely one of my favorite subjects to research and talk about. So I will see you next time. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Please be kind, please be safe, and I will see you next time. Bye. Ohu, I just need you to know that is not that's not phonetic at all.